once upon a time, 50,000-ish years ago, we lived in tribes. Cultural paleontologists tell us we're no more than 150 strong, because that's what could survive in the environment at that time. There was danger all around those tribes. Forces that they could not control wanted to kill them, to maim them, to displace them. The weather, competitive tribes, animals that were stronger and faster. Our survival was at stake. Human existence was at stake. And yet, I stand here today before you, and you sit before me, mostly, and we survived. Something's at play here. How did that happen? Well, it turns out there's a pattern. It turns out that there's a formula. And over 50 millennia, that pattern and that formula has played out, and the tribes and the organizations and the individuals who followed that were more successful than others. It's been there for everyone to see. All I've done is codify it. And I call it the law of infusion of purpose. And the law of infusion of purpose applies equally today as it did back then. And it explains why some people in some organizations who start with purpose, who start with why, become successful, and why some who start with why, who's stating their brand, their cause, their belief, what they stand for, are not successful. So let's take a look. But before we do, a little neuroscience. 50,000 years ago, our brains were not as evolved as they are today. The limbic brain, where all emotion is held, was very evolved. And these tribes were instinctual in the way they behaved. The law of infusion of purpose came about because survival of the fittest. These tribes that survived tested this instinctually. The neocortex, the modern part of the brain, was not evolved. There was no capacity for language. So what we're about to see here, the law of infusion of innovation, of which there are 6 components to the equation, all came about from an EQ that our ancestors 50,000 years ago had. So it's very simple. It starts with a shared purpose. The tribe had one thing in common and one thing to do. They had to survive. They didn't have a choice. They didn't know any better. All the members of the tribe had to agree that survival was the thing that they were working towards. If you didn't agree to that, you got kicked out of the tribe. If you didn't pull your weight, there was no place for you in the tribe. You were a virus, so to speak. The tribe had early adopters and innovators too. Innovation was key to our society back then. Figuring out how to make the fire last for longer, how to protect it when it rained, a new way to hunt the woolly mammoth. It was required for a tribe to survive. The rewards back then were all biological. If you successfully killed a mammoth and you ate the protein, that was good for you. Your body responded. You would say, I should do that again. If you found the right roots and vegetables to eat, it was nutritious for you. You would do it again. If you saw something on the horizon, it took a little bit of an effort to run across the savanna to get there, your body would release epinephrine to give you that runner's high. And then when you succeeded, it would release dopamine, little hits that created satisfaction that you achieved a goal. Storytelling was the 5th pillar. Back then, there were no video cameras. There were no cell phones. There was no pen or paper. The way we shared our experiences, the way we passed down the experiences was through stories. When someone from another tribe came and visited us, the way we knew that we were friends and not enemies is because we had common stories and common themes together. And in fact, after fire was invented, the only thing we could do at night when it was so dark outside was sit around the campfire and tell stories. So it's part of our DNA. And all the tribes aligned their operation. Every member of the tribe, from the chief to the hunters, to the gatherers, to the shamans, had a job to do. Each of their operations was equal, one no more equal or better than the other. My favorite one is the person who was tasked with keeping the fire going at night. Why? Because if you fell asleep and the fire went out, you could be attacked. So you had to understand and trust and cooperate with everyone else so that you could go to sleep, knowing that you would wake up in the morning. The law of infusion of purpose. So fast forward 50,000 years to today's time. What's different? Well, back then, survival was a long-term horizon. And the tribes, that's the only way they looked at it. Today, we live in a society where short-term fixes are things that everyone goes after. And people are thinking now that purpose, or a declaration of purpose, is a panacea, a silver bullet to solve the problems. They haven't learned from history that just doesn't work. And so they make the excuse that says, today's times are different. What worked in the past can't possibly work today. And so they continue that behavior. And we know, though, that the data suggests otherwise. That those companies and those people that simply declare their purpose and say what they stand for are not always successful. Why is that? It's because if we go back to the law of infusion of purpose, we realize that the first element of that equation, shared purpose, stating a purpose, is only 1/6 of how you're successful. You can't fight 50 millennials of success. Gandhi noticed and put it at a very macro statement. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. He knew at the macro level what the law of infusion of purpose meant. He didn't understand at the equation level what all those 6 principles were, but at the macro level he did. And what he meant was this, that what is required to be successful is the balance between what you say and what you do, between what you declare your brand promise to be and then how you deliver on that brand promise. And I'll remind you, this is true for individuals, it's true for companies, it's true for any brand and organizations of all type. So let me give you an example. And I'm going to start with a personal example, and then we'll move to an organizational example. I'm here today. I'm going to tell you that what I want to stand for, what I want to be known for, is being a good husband, good spouse, a good father, and a good friend. When I leave here today, I will have been sitting here all day, and I get back to my home, I'm going to have 100 emails waiting for me. And although I promised my wife I would have dinner with her, there are outside forces that will cause me, perhaps, to say, I'm sorry, I can't have dinner. And then next week when I go on a business trip, outside forces might cause me to forget to call my son on his birthday, or forget to come home because I promised a friend that I would go to a concert with him or her. Not allowing me to keep my brand promise, not allowing me to live into what I stood for. And then one day, as I'm getting later in life, I'm going to say, oh, you know what? I did say that's what I was going to do, and I better do that. And okay, for a little while I did, but then I didn't, and I didn't again, and finally we arrive at my grave. And as people stand before my grave and look at my epitaph, if I say I was going to do something, but I didn't balance it with doing what I said, what will I be remembered by? What will you be remembered for? At best, it's rest and peace, not a lot to say. At worst, if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, what are you? A liar. I don't think any of us want that to be what our legacy is. There's another possible outcome. You say you want to be a beloved spouse, I say I want to be a beloved father. I say I want to be a beloved friend. And then although it's hard, when I go home tonight, I don't pick up my iPhone. I don't start going through the emails. I have dinner with my wife. And when I'm on that business trip, even though it'd be great to go with my colleagues to the Napa Valley after for the weekend, I come home and I go to my daughter's soccer game. And although it would be easy not to, I remember my friend's birthday and those friends who are in my tribe that I care about, who believe in what I believe in, who believe in being a beloved friend. And I do that. And then because life interrupts you, and you can't always be perfect, and everything is trying to imbalance you all the time, you slip, because we all do, because that's what being human is all about. But then you pick yourself up and you do the hard work again, and you live into the brand promise that you made to yourself and you declared publicly to all of your friends and all of your family, and you do it again and again and again until you get to your grave. And then what happens? People standing in front, reading your epitaph, it's totally different, right? I'm remembered as a beloved spouse, a beloved friend, and a beloved father. At the macro level, you see the impact of what the law of infusion of purpose means when you start with a purpose, but then you finish with doing the 5 additional pillars of the formula. It works every time. Let's look at a corporate example now. I just shared a personal one. At a corporate example in modern times. For an example of modern times, I want to use an analogy, a story. We know that storytelling unites us all. 50,000 years ago, there was no wheel yet invented, but today there is. So let's look at the wheel as the analogy. And I want you to imagine for a moment that it's not just any wheel, but it's a wagon wheel. And you all know what a wagon wheel looks like. It has spokes, right? When the spokes of a wagon wheel are completely balanced, completely aligned, the wheel rolls. If one of the spokes is imbalanced, if one of the spokes is not aligned with the other, what happens? The wheel wobbles. You still might move forward, but the wheel wobbles. If 2 of the spokes aren't aligned, what happens? The wheel wobbles a little bit more. It still may move forward if you're lucky. But if 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of those spokes are not aligned or not in balance, the wheel will not move backward or forward. You're stuck in the middle, unable to make a decision, unable to make an impact, unable to do what you said you were going to do. You want to avoid having misalignment of the spokes at all costs. This is what that might look like in today's corporate environment. The same 6 elements of the law of infusion of purpose. For analogy's sake, aligned in a circle around the spokes of a wheel. In order for an organization, a family, a tribe, to run smoothly, to move forward, to not be stuck in the mud, you need all 6 things aligned. Shared purpose. So let's use an example. Harley Davidson. In the late 1950s, Harley Davidson was born out of a vision, out of a belief of the hippies of that era that they didn't want to conform with the establishment, that they wanted to be free, that they wanted to do what they wanted. And so they declared, the founders of Harley Davidson, they found other like-minded people, they aligned mindset, and they declared their shared purpose loudly so everyone could hear. We want to fulfill dreams of personal freedom by being able to get on a bike and go wherever we want, whenever we want. And you can't tell us not to do it. 2 of the pillars aligned. They were early adopters and innovators. They had to invent a new type of bike. Harley Davidsons aren't the best bikes in the world, but they have a sleek elegance to them. They experimented. They found a look and a feel and a style that appealed to the people who believed in what they believed in. Innovation is key. Innovation was key 50,000 years ago. The rewards, intrinsic rewards, the difference between extrinsic rewards, which is the carrot and the stick, versus intrinsic rewards. Daniel Pink speaks about it in his book Drive, right? The idea of feeling trusted and fulfilled and happy when you go to work every day. They set up that company, Harley-Davidson, so that the entrance rewards were aligned with their purpose. They did what they say they were going to do, and both they and their customers felt rewarded in everything they did. You can't talk to a Harley owner without them telling a story, a great story about what it was like to go on a trip, about how they met their wife or great friends on a cross-country tour, how they flew to Vietnam and rented Harleys and had people in the villages stop them and looking at their bike and ask them for the stories. It's part of their culture. It's part of a shared experience. And finally, to align all of your tribe operations to support the purpose. It's the infusion of purpose, the law of infusion of purpose. All of the operations, which is exactly the opposite of the way most companies think. Most companies think that their operations are there to create efficiency, to generate more revenue. The opposite is true of companies who follow the law of infusion of purpose. Their operations, their people, process, and technologies are there to support the vision of the shared purpose. And when you do that as an individual or as an organization, what happens? You become a beloved person. You become a beloved brand. Because it's not what you say, it's the combination of what you say and what you do. And maintaining that balance is hard. So, if I can leave you with one thought today, it's this: that while purpose gets all the credit, declaring purpose is inspiring. Declaring purpose brings people and attracts people to your movement. Without the other 5 elements of the equation, without the complete law of infusion of purpose, you can't be successful. So it's the hard work and the daily work of consistently balancing what you say and what you do, of consistently balancing your brand promise and your brand delivery, of consistently balancing your what and your why, that transforms ordinary people and ordinary organizations into beloved brands. Thank you.